particular episode, what I'm going to talk about is attachment to the motorcycle. Now, I don't have the answer. I just have a few ways of approaching it and principles that I apply that make it easy for me to ride. And it can be applied even at my age, you know, in my 60s. So before I get into that, it's also important to point out that when you're talking about body position and attachment to a motorcycle and that type of thing, you always should consider going to a school like the California Superbike School. Because when you change your body position, one of the problems with it is what you feel when you move your body isn't necessarily what people see. So a 1-inch movement can feel like 3 feet, and it gets exaggerated because it's a different position. You're not comfortable because you're not used to using it. So I always recommend to people, get some coaching, get people to observe what you're doing so that first of all, you understand whether or not you're doing it correctly. And secondly, understanding whether or not you're introducing other factors in here that are contributing to bike instability or something like that. So that said, let me talk about attachment and movement on a motorcycle. The reason we actually want to attach to the motorcycle is the bike is inherently a stable platform. Right? And then the rider gets on and the rider introduces instability. So for example, the steering wheel, the forks, the front wheel tends to wobble. If you're under a lot of acceleration, the front gets light, you might get some sliding and movement. If you are countering that through putting excess pressure on the bars, you're actually not letting the bike do its own thing, not letting it find its own stability. And you, by virtue of that, introducing instability. The second thing is, if you're under braking conditions and things like that, and all your body weight is going forward through the hands and very little through the lower body here, well, now you're adding more pressure to the steering mechanism of the front of the bike, which is, you know, it's got controls on it. It should be almost be called, you know, they should be called control bars. They're not hang-on bars. They're the mechanisms you use to control the motorcycle, and most of the controls are there. Now, when all the weight goes forward like that, if you try to turn into a corner, say, turning into turn 10 MG at Phillip Island, all your weight is going through here and you're trying to steer. By counter steering and putting pressure on the inside bar, the outside bar hand is also putting pressure. So it can contribute to you turning at a slower rate than you need to. So there's a bunch of reasons why we want to attach correctly to the motorcycle. Now, at the very basics of it, right, you could just sit on the motorcycle and squeeze your legs together. And that would give you an attachment. And you think about it, if I'm squeezing, putting pressure here, as I'm braking, right, I've now got weight going through the center of the bike here, not through the bars so much. That would be the minimum you could do. The other thing you could do is, and it's one of the things we get people to experiment with at the school, that is just doing a calf raise. So as they do the calf raise, feet are on the toes and the foot pegs. As you do the calf raise, you get a lot more pressure on the tank. And interestingly enough, you can apply that type of pressure with one knee on the tank. You don't need both knees, but it's a pretty useful way to do it. And when we're coaching people not moving their body so much, that's the predominant way that we would attach. Now, the other thing you can do is you can move your hips. Now, a few things about the movement. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. You can make some simple mistakes with hip movement, and the most basic one that we see is this. People actually slide their hip across and they rotate around the tank. So the center of the tank, or the fuel cap, becomes like the center of the circle. They rotate around it, and a few things happen here. First of all, the body's crossed up. Notice my chest is pointed across the top of the tank. You know, the head's still up here and here, so in the center of the bike. So they're not necessarily getting a lot of weight on the inside, not moving the center of gravity low and inside, because all the weight's in the upper body. The other thing is, by doing that, when you slide and rotate, the outside leg detaches from the bike. It's very hard to hold pressure there when your body's rotated and you're facing across to basically the outside of the corner. And all the inside weight, or the weight is on the inside here, plus your upper body tends to go to the inside handlebar. And that contributes a lot to people having low sides, hanging on to here. And you might find that if you see pictures of yourself, you go into a corner where you feel a little bit uncomfortable with the speed, might be the fastest you've ever been into a particular corner, you'll find that sometimes people start to get into that position and cross up because the upper body's moving away from the corner, from the ground, and they feel a bit more comfortable up there. So we want to avoid that at all costs. You're actually better off leaving your lower body stationary and moving your upper body on the inside, because this is where the weight is. Now, if you're going to move your hips, right, the useful way to do it is, and I'll show you the way that I apply it, and you can go and adapt that and, you know, apply the principles in any way that works for you. Now, what I do is, if you move your hips across, right, straight across, but the upper body goes to the inside of the bike. Now, a couple of things can help you here. First of all, by having your upper body on the inside, you're not losing, you're not rotating, right? It keeps you in that line where you've got pressure on the outside leg. The second thing is, if you rotate your inner foot, right, so that you kind of got the heel closer to the swing arm, now you've opened your hips up, much more pressure on the tank, and you're in a good position in terms of lowering and putting your weight on the inside of the bike. So the centre of gravity is much lower and more on the inside. So that would be how I do it. The other thing to think about, and you can see this when you watch World Superbike and MotoGP, is when you do get in that position, you can also hang on with your outside heel. So you'll see the MotoGP riders use their feet a lot. They don't. They often have their knee away from the tank. That doesn't mean there's not much pressure there. There's a lot of pressure on the inside thigh on the tank. So that's probably a better position. Very easy. Slip across to the other side and occupy the same position with the heel rotated. Back to the other side. It's actually harder stationary because there's no centrifugal force holding me on the motorbike. But the good thing about it is I can actually get in that position and I can hold myself quite easily just through the lower part of my body. Very little weight on the bars, certainly not excessive. So there you have it. Give it a try. Like I said, consider coaching, because any movements you make can introduce other problems. And secondly, the movements you make may not be the right movements, because a small movement into a different position can feel like a long way. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you get something out of it.